Did you notice that I couldn't do any front bumps in those days?
Well, that was allowed?
No.
Just side bumps?
Just side bumps in the arms.
Yeah. Did you know how to do a front bump?
And what?
Is there a mustache in Mexico?
In 1959, she showed her naked back through foggy glass. America lost its mind. Mamie Van Doren wasn't just another blonde. She was the bad girl who went too far. While Marilyn played sweet, Mamie played dirty. She wore fig leaves instead of clothes. She sang rock music when nice girls didn't. She slept with whoever she wanted. Now, 94, she's outlived them all. The bombshell who broke every rule is finally revealing what really happened behind closed doors. Joan Lucille Olander was born on February 6, 1931, in the tiny town of Rowena, South Dakota. Her father, Warner Carl Olander, came from a wealthy farming family, but he didn't live that life. Instead, he worked long hours in a rock quarry for only $7 a day, which would be about $125 today. Her mother, Lucille Harriet Bennett, had bigger dreams. She named her daughter after the famous actress Joan Crawford, almost like she knew that one day her little girl might end up in the movies too. Joan grew up with a mix of Swedish, English, and German roots. But there was something even more unusual in her family line. Her mother's father was known as a Black Swede, a nickname that came from his Mongolian ancestry. Centuries earlier, his people had traveled from the steppes of Mongolia to settle in Sweden. That heritage gave Joan a unique look, something that would help her stand out later in Hollywood. Her sharp features and striking beauty didn't come from a bottle. They came from generations of history. When she was just 4 years old, her life changed. Her parents moved to Sioux City, Iowa, but Joan stayed behind with her grandparents. While they worked, she spent her days inside dark movie theaters. It was there, watching the silver screen light up, that she learned about beauty and charm. She studied how Ginger Rogers danced, how Carole Lombard's hair always looked perfect, and how stars carried themselves like they were floating. She wasn't just being entertained, she was learning how to become one of them. By 1942, the family was back together again. They packed up and moved west, like so many others during World War II, and landed in a small apartment on Harvard Boulevard, right in the heart of Hollywood. For Joan, now a young girl full of movie dreams, it felt like everything was starting to line up. That feeling became real in the summer of 1949. Joan was 18 years old and living in California when she decided, almost on a whim, to enter the Miss Palm Springs pageant. She didn't think she'd win. There were so many beautiful girls there. But to her surprise, she did. That night changed everything. Sitting in the crowd was none other than Howard Hughes, the rich and powerful owner of RKO Pictures. He saw something in Joan and moved quickly to pull her into the world of film. He told his secretary to set up a meeting. He thought she might be a star. When Joan walked into Hughes's office, she wasn't nervous. She had the confidence of someone who had done this 100 times before. But what she found wasn't what she expected. Hughes, known for his peculiar behavior, began with invasive questions about her age and home life, creating an awkward atmosphere. As the interview concluded, Hughes crossed a disturbing line by asking the teenage girl point-blank, "Are you a virgin?" Without missing a beat, the quick-witted teenager delivered what would become a legendary response. "You'll never know, Mr. Hughes." Joan never planned on getting involved with Howard Hughes, but somehow it happened. He was much older, old enough to be her father, and she was still finding her place in Hollywood. At first, it seemed like he was just interested in helping her career. After all, Hughes owned RKO Studios. He had power, money, and connections. For a young actress, that kind of attention could open doors, but it came with strings attached. Things moved quickly. He started showing interest that went beyond business. Joan was pulled into a relationship she didn't really want. Looking back, she admitted he had a way of taking control without ever raising his voice. He didn't yell or demand things directly, but he made sure things went his way. Joan later described him as odd, quiet, and always in control. He was very demanding, very controlling, she once said. Even then, she could sense something wasn't quite right. He liked to stay in the shadows. Their dates weren't normal. Instead of picking her up in a nice car, he sent an old brown Chevy, one her mother hated. He didn't like to be seen in public, so they would sneak in through the back doors of restaurants, slipping through kitchens just to avoid attention. Before she became Mamie Van Doren, she was Joan Olander, a young actress trying to find her place in Hollywood. Between 1950 and 1952, she landed small roles in movies made by RKO, the studio run by Howard Hughes. At the time, she was still using her real name. These early roles didn't have much dialogue. In fact, she wasn't even credited most of the time. She was just a face in the background, a showgirl here, a blonde in a theater there, or someone sitting at the bar in a hotel scene. Still, these small parts gave her a feel for the camera, the set, and the fast-paced world of movie making. One of the most chaotic productions she worked on was a film called Jet Pilot, starring John Wayne and Janet Leigh. The movie started filming in 1949 but didn't come out until 1957. Hughes kept delaying it, always wanting to change something, always looking for perfection. Mamie played a woman in the Air Force, but again, it was a tiny part, and she didn't get a credit. Years later, she remembered doing around 5 movies for Hughes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was her start. Around this time, her personal life took a strange turn. Still a teenager, she got engaged to Jack Dempsey, the former heavyweight boxing champion. He was nearly 40 years older than her. People were shocked. She later said he was sweet but childish. When asked why she ended it, she didn't hold back. "He was too old for me. I was only 18. That breakup wasn't just about age, though. Universal Studios had just offered her a contract, with one condition. She had to stop seeing Dempsey. They wanted someone younger by her side, someone with a better public image. She didn't hesitate. She chose her career. That wasn't her only major decision in 1950. That same year, at 19, she married Jack Newman, a man she'd met through her father at boxing events. He owned a sportswear company, and for Joan, this was a way out. Her parents were strict, and she wanted freedom. They ran off to Santa Barbara and got married, even though she had to lie about her age to the judge. At first, she enjoyed the lifestyle: nice clothes, a fancy Beverly Hills apartment, and romantic nights. But things turned bad quickly. Newman grew jealous. He didn't like the attention she got, even when she wore clothes he'd bought her. His jealousy turned violent. Once, he tried to throw her off a balcony. Another time, he destroyed her favorite hat in a rage. 6 months later, she filed for divorce. She was done. Meanwhile, Jet Pilot was still stuck in production. Hughes kept reshooting scenes and changing things, chasing a vision no one else understood. Mamie had long since moved on, but the film wouldn't hit theaters until 1957. By then, she was no longer Joan Olander. She was Mamie Van Doren, a rising star at Universal. Everything changed on January 20th, 1953. That's the day she signed a 7-year contract with Universal Studios. They wanted their own version of Marilyn Monroe, and they believed Joan had the looks and attitude to pull it off. But they didn't want her real name. They gave her a new one, Mamie, after First Lady Mamie Eisenhower, and Van Doren, to make her sound a little more exotic. She later joked, "I went to bed as Joan Olander and woke up as Mamie Van Doren." Just like that, she was reborn, not just with a new name, but with a new image. Later that same year, she landed her first big role in The All-American, playing opposite Tony Curtis. It was the perfect part. She played Susie Ward, a rebellious young woman who didn't play by the rules. This was the start of her bad girl persona, sexy, bold, and totally unafraid. It wasn't an act. Mamie would later say she was just being herself. Critics noticed too. One even wrote that she didn't just act like a bad girl, she was the bad girl, full of energy and danger. That role helped define her career, both on and off the screen. Mamie Van Doren was always meant to be a star, but in 1955, she made a choice that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She turned down a role written just for her, a role in Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter. She said no because she didn't want to be seen as just another Marilyn Monroe. She already felt trapped by the comparisons. Her studio, Universal, was pushing her as their version of Marilyn, and she was trying to break free from that mold. But when she passed on the role, it went to someone else, an unknown actress named Jane Mansfield. Jane not only starred in the Broadway show, but also in the movie version. Almost overnight, she became a major star. Mamie knew she had made a big mistake. She would later say that this one decision could have changed everything for her. Instead, it created a new rival and doubled the competition. Even though Hollywood wanted her to play the same kind of dumb blonde roles Monroe was known for, Mamie had other ideas. She wanted to be different. In films like Running Wild and The Second Greatest Sex, she played tougher, more rebellious characters. She wasn't just a pretty face, she had attitude. And in 1957, she made history by becoming the first actress to sing rock and roll in an American musical film. That movie was Untamed Youth, and it gave her a chance to connect with the rising youth culture. It wasn't just about the music, it was about breaking rules, pushing boundaries, and doing something new. Mamie wasn't trying to copy Monroe, she was carving out her own path. But it wasn't easy. Universal had her under contract, yet they kept putting her in small parts. Big billing, small roles. It was frustrating. One example was Star in the Dust, where she was barely on screen, even though her name was front and center. That film had a young Clint Eastwood in the background, uncredited. After a few too many disappointments like that, Mamie decided she'd had enough. She stopped taking Universal's roles and started working with other studios. She wanted control. She wanted better parts. She was ready to fight for her place. By now, she had become one of the so-called 3 M's: Marilyn Monroe, Mamie Van Doren, and Jane Mansfield. The press loved the idea. 3 blonde bombshells, all glamorous, all fighting for attention. But Mamie was the one who stood out by playing the bad girl, the rebel, the one who wouldn't follow the rules. Monroe was soft and sweet. Mansfield was loud and exaggerated. Mamie was tough, sharp, and always a little dangerous. Her rivalry with Mansfield kept heating up. Jane had taken the role Mamie rejected, and she never let her forget it. The two traded insults and avoided working together whenever they could. At one point, Mamie turned down a film just because Jane was in it. Things got especially tense one night in 1964 at the Whiskey A Go-Go. The Beatles were there, Mansfield was chatting with them, and then George Harrison accidentally spilled a drink all over Mamie. That moment seemed to sum up the chaos between them. Still, a few years later, they did end up co-starring in The Las Vegas Hillbillies. But it wasn't peaceful. Mansfield refused to be in scenes with Mamie and even mocked her, calling her the drive-in's answer to Marilyn Monroe. Even with all that drama, Mamie kept working. She found her niche in teen rebellion films that pushed against the rules of the time. In Untamed Youth, she played a girl sentenced to work on a cotton farm, all while dancing and singing rock songs. In Born Reckless, she was a saloon singer who falls for a rodeo star. In High School Confidential, she was part of a story that tackled drugs and teen trouble, subjects Hollywood usually avoided. These films made her even more popular with younger audiences. She wasn't playing sweethearts. She was playing women who wanted freedom, money, and fun. She didn't need rescuing. She made her own choices. In 1958, she got a chance to shine in a big Hollywood film, Teacher's Pet, starring Clark Gable and Doris Day. Mamie was cast as a nightclub singer. Her costumes were designed by the legendary Edith Head, and she looked stunning. But things didn't go as planned. Behind the scenes, there was tension. Mamie later claimed Doris Day ignored her and didn't want her stealing the spotlight. Some of Mamie's scenes were cut, and others had to be reshot using a double to get the right reaction from Day. In the end, Mamie was only in one scene, but she made it count. She performed her number with such confidence that Clark Gable looked genuinely flustered. The movie made a lot of money, and Mamie's dress from the film was later sold at auction as a collector's item. Mamie Van Doren lit up Hollywood in the late 1950s with more than just her looks. She had boldness, timing, and a wild streak that made her unforgettable. By 1959, her name was everywhere, not just because of her movies, but because of the company she kept. One of the most talked about affairs was with Steve McQueen. He wasn't quite the legend yet, but already had that dangerous edge. Mamie later said he introduced her to sex on LSD. It was risky, even by Hollywood standards, but that was Mamie, never playing it safe. Around the same time, she was also involved with Steve Cochran, the kind of guy who wore his bad boy image like a badge, and with a young, smooth George Hamilton, just starting out in the business. Their fling didn't last long, but it was flashy enough to make the papers. What made Mamie different was that she didn't hide these things. While other women stayed quiet, Mamie talked. She once said, "I was living in the 50s, but I was in the year 2000. For a country still stuck in black and white morality, she was living in full color." But her boldness didn't start in 1959. Back in 1953, she was paired with Rock Hudson for a studio-arranged date at the Golden Globes. Everyone thought it would be harmless PR. They were wrong. After the ceremony, they went back to her parents' house. As she reached for coffee cups, Hudson turned her around and kissed her hard. Mamie remembered feeling his body pressed against hers, and the surprise of it all. This was the man everyone whispered was gay. That night didn't line up with what she'd been told. It confused people and shook up the image Hudson had worked so hard to build. No one knew quite what to make of it. But Mamie didn't seem fazed. She just added it to the growing list of moments that made her life feel like one long, unpredictable movie. A few years later, Frank Sinatra entered the picture. Just days after Mamie had separated from her husband, Ray Anthony, Sinatra called her. The fact that Anthony and Sinatra were friends didn't slow him down at all. He pulled out all the stops, fancy dinners, charm on overdrive. He was older, experienced, and used to getting what he wanted. But it didn't quite work this time. Mamie said she just wasn't into him that way. It wasn't that he did anything wrong. The spark just wasn't there. Sinatra might have been irresistible to most women, but Mamie wasn't most women. By that point, she had made a name for herself on the big screen. 1959 was especially busy. 5 films in 1 year. In Girlstown, she played a tough girl sent to a reformatory run by nuns. There was a shower scene where her back showed through a foggy door. That was enough to stir up a firestorm. Today, it would barely raise eyebrows, but in 1959, it was a shock to the system. The film also starred a young Paul Anka, who sang a couple of his hits. The whole thing was loud, fast, and pulpy, just the way audiences liked it. But Hollywood wasn't built for women like Mamie to last. In 1960, Universal Studios cut her loose. She had been their answer to Marilyn Monroe, but tastes were changing. Her final film for them was The Private Lives of Adam and Eve, where she appeared wearing only fig leaves in dream sequences. It was bold, strange, and right in line with her image. But it didn't save her contract. Suddenly, she was on her own. She took whatever roles she could find, often in foreign or low-budget productions. Some of them were forgettable. Others later became cult favorites because they were so over the top. Mamie just kept going, even if the spotlight wasn't as bright anymore. In 1962, she started dating Bo Belinsky, a pitcher for the LA Angels, who had just thrown a no-hitter. He was young, cocky, and loved the attention. Her ex-husband actually helped set them up, maybe hoping to end alimony payments. Mamie and Bo looked like a match made for magazine covers. They even got engaged, but things got messy. There was a fight involving another woman. Bo was questioned about it, and the gossip columns went wild. By mid-1963, the engagement was off. Bo said he couldn't marry her, but wouldn't say why. Mamie didn't beg for answers. She moved on. The movie they were supposed to do together got scrapped, and their love story became just another wild chapter in her already wild life. While all this was happening, Mamie was also trying to make it in music. She was the first actress to sing rock and roll in an American musical film. That was in Untamed Youth, where she belted out Rolling Stone. A few years later, she released songs like The Beat Generation and Bikini with No Top on the Top. They didn't top the charts, but they captured her style, playful, daring, and just a bit outrageous. Mamie Van Doren had already turned heads in Hollywood, but in 1966, something rare happened. She shared the screen with fellow blonde bombshell Jane Mansfield in the Las Vegas Hillbillies. It was the only time 2 of the 3 M's, Mamie, Jane, and Marilyn Monroe, ever appeared in a film together. Mamie played a bar singer named Boots Malone, while Jane was the dazzling Tawny, helping the main character save his Vegas bar. It was a low-budget comedy packed with country music performances and cameos from real-life stars. The story was thin, but fans didn't care. Seeing Mamie and Jane together was enough. Sadly, just a year later, Mansfield died in a car crash. That one movie became not just a goofy B-comedy, but a final glimpse of 2 legends side by side. That same year, Mamie took a turn toward something completely different: science fiction. She starred in The Navy versus the Night Monsters, a film about killer trees. Yes, killer trees. The effects were cheap, the plot was bizarre, and the wardrobe was designed to show off Mamie's figure more than anything else. But it didn't stop there. 2 years later, she appeared in Voyage to the Planet of Prehistoric Women, where she played a Venusian in seashell bras and tight pants. The movie was stitched together from a Soviet film, with Mamie and other actresses added into new scenes. It didn't make much sense, but somehow it worked, at least for fans of campy sci-fi. Mamie didn't shy away from the strange. If Hollywood was changing, she was going to find new ways to stay in it. As her career shifted, Mamie made another bold move, this time into real danger. In 1968, she flew to Vietnam to entertain American troops. Unlike other stars who performed in safe zones, Mamie went straight to the front lines. She flew in helicopters, sang in remote fire bases, and visited wounded soldiers in hospitals. The horrors she saw there left a permanent mark on her. During one performance, a helicopter flew overhead carrying body bags. Mamie stopped singing. She couldn't go on. It broke her heart. She returned again in 1970, determined to lift spirits, but deeply affected. What started as patriotism had turned into something much more personal. She still supported the soldiers, but the war itself left her shaken. While Mamie was trying to navigate her place in Hollywood, her love life was just as complicated. In 1966, she married Lee Myers, a baseball player she'd only dated for 4 months. He brought her into a quieter world in Orange County, far from the spotlight. But the marriage didn't last. 2 years later, they were divorced. It was Mamie's third failed marriage. She had tried love before, with her abusive first husband and with Ray Anthony, the father of her only child. Each time, the dream faded. Then came a marriage that ended almost as quickly as it began. In 1972, Mamie tied the knot with Ross McClintock, a wealthy oil executive. But it lasted just 37 days. He wanted her to be a quiet housewife. Mamie wasn't having it. She had already refused to be a studio decoration. She wasn't about to become one at cocktail parties. The breakup got ugly. Instead of a divorce, a judge annulled the marriage. Mamie suspected it was to cut her off from any claim to McClintock's wealth. It was a short, bitter chapter in her long history of heartbreak. By the mid-1970s, film roles were drying up. Mamie could have faded out, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned into music, releasing an album in 1976. It wasn't her first time singing, but it was her boldest effort to reinvent herself. She toured with theater shows, kept her name alive, and even lived in style in London for a while, complete with fancy furniture and a flat near Harvey Nichols. She was no longer a Hollywood favorite, but she wasn't giving up. Then something unexpected happened. Amid all the chaos and failed relationships, Mamie met Thomas Dixon, a photographer and actor 13 years younger than her. They fell in love slowly, not impulsively like before. They dated for 5 years before getting married in 1979. This one stuck. They're still together, more than 45 years later. While Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield were gone too soon, Mamie not only survived, she found peace. In 1987, Mamie reminded everyone she was still full of surprises. She released a tell-all book, Playing the Field, and it shook Hollywood. She didn't hold back, writing about steamy affairs, wild nights, and awkward moments with stars like Steve McQueen and Burt Reynolds. She shared details that left readers stunned and gossip columns buzzing. At the launch party, she rolled up in a white Rolls-Royce, dressed in Chanel. She was no longer the bubblegum blonde of the 50s. She was something bolder. Years passed, but Mamie didn't slow down. At 80, she dropped a country album called Still a Troublemaker. It came with a sexy music video and online promotion. She even dabbled in dance remixes, proving she could still play the game, even if it had changed completely. She had fans old and new, and she wasn't afraid to market herself like a modern star. Then came her last film role in 2012. She was 81, playing a sea goddess in the American tetralogy. It was a quiet, mysterious film, but for her fans, it meant everything. It was her final bow on screen closing out a film career that started back in 1951. From blonde bombshell to space queen to goddess, Mamie had done it all. Now, at 94, she's still standing. She outlived her famous peers, stayed married, and even published a book about her pet parrot. She chats with fans online, posts her thoughts, and shares memories from a life lived at full speed. Mamie Van Doren didn't just survive Hollywood, she outlasted it. And somehow, she's still a troublemaker.